It's time to wake to sleep with the number one sleep authority, Sleep Science Today, and Sleep Better Tonight.
For many people, nighttime is supposed to be the most peaceful part of the day. But for those carrying trauma, the moment their head hits the pillow is when the mind gets loudest. Today, we're talking about why trauma can lead to insomnia and what can actually help. Our guest is Kristen Windsor. She is a mentor, author, speaker, and creator of the Self-Healing Miracle Method and CEO of Kristen's Quantum Catalyzers. And I'm your host, Andrew Kolsky, on Sleep Science Today. So, Kristen Windsor, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Well, we are interested in hearing your story because we have not really had a show yet where we talk much about trauma and its impact on sleep. And so, this is going to be something new for the audience to really kind of take in. So let's start with the basics. How did you get into this field in the first place?
Yeah, I didn't choose this career path. It chose me. It came to my door saying, "Hello, we need you." And so my health battles started from a very young age. And after 15 years of traditional treatment, I'd seen hundreds of therapists, psychiatrists. Nothing was working, and there was a very long list of what was going on. It wasn't just one struggle. And then things got worse to a debilitating degree, and I said, "I can't continue like this." So I actually taught myself neuroscience and developed my own self-healing protocols and was able to resolve all these battles in a relatively short period of time that were considered incurable by professionals. And that's what led me into the work was I need to teach people this. I need to teach people how they could heal themselves and have full power within the well-being of their mind and body to really get to live the life they desire from love and wholeness.
Wow. Okay. So it sounds like there's a whole lot in the background there. So let's do this. Let's go back in time to when you first started to recognize that something was going on. How old were you and what did you first experience?
I think I was about 10 years old, and it started with just a very weird insomnia type thing. I would go to bed, fall asleep, but then wake up in the middle of the night feeling something I didn't know what it was. It was anxiety, but I had no idea what that term was. And I just felt awake when I should have felt asleep, right? I felt restless and had energy when I was just sleeping before that. And then it got worse, and there was nightmares and just horrific nightmares that started coming up. And so then started to avoid going to sleep because of dreading the nightmares that would come up. And then when I would fall asleep, I'd wake up in the middle of the night soaked in sweat. My whole room was just torn about. My pillows were across the room. It was like I'd been in a war during my sleep. And then, so I wasn't getting a lot of sleep. And then during the day, there was this really weird feeling, which was anxiety, but I had no language for it at the time. And just feeling kind of just this restlessness, this uncomfortability in my body, this kind of chaos in my mind, and didn't really understand what it was. And there's no words to articulate it. When you're 10 or 11 years old, like you don't know what normal is. So you're like, I guess everyone just feels this way. And there's no really words to describe it. And so that's kind of where it started. And I had no idea at the time. It took a very long time to discover it. But it turns out there was suppressed trauma from age 4. And those body memories were resurfacing. And that's what was disrupting the sleep.
Wow. Okay. So, um, geez, so many questions in my head. So when you first sort of recognized at 10 years old that something was going on, what did you do? Did you share it with your parents? Did they have any idea? Did they just say, "Oh, don't worry about it"? Like what happened?
Yeah, the original thing was middle of the night. It's early on when it was an issue. Knocked on the parents' door, like, I need help. I don't know what's wrong. And they were very upset about being woken up. To put it in perspective, though, my dad was working 2 jobs. My mom was running a farm. I had 4 brothers, and we were all at home. And so there was a lot of stuff going on. So sleep was very important for them. And so for them to be woken up in the middle of the night and their daughter says, "Hey, I can't sleep," and there wasn't wasn't really, again, there wasn't really words to describe it beyond that. So there wasn't really the ability to convey that it was a more serious issue. And they're like, well, just because you can't sleep doesn't mean we shouldn't be able to get our sleep. Like, we need sleep too. And they, said, please don't wake us again, and locked the bedroom door. And, now as an adult, I do understand the perspective because they were tired. They're like, I don't know how to help you. Just go back to bed. But from the child perspective of my younger self, it was, the only source of the help and support and safety just said, there's nothing I can do for you. And so, maybe tried to mention it a few other times, but there wasn't the language to articulate how intense it was. So it went unchecked for many years and just kind of coped and lived with it for a long time. And then it got worse after that.
Boy, okay. So was this happening every single night or just sometimes, or give us a sense of the intensity?
I think it was every night, but there is a chance that my memory isn't fully accurate because it was a while ago. And I was it's kind of another story, but I'm actually on the other side of healing from 7 years of amnesia from a traumatic brain injury. So
Gosh.
looking back always has its challenges. But it was happening very regularly. I'd say at least 2/3 of the time, if not more.
Uh-huh.
And eventually the body will crash and sleep because it's just been sleep deprived for so long. It'll go through that exhaustive crash eventually. And I think that's what was happening. But it was going on for about 3 or 4 years until it got worse. And then there were other symptoms. But then I struggled with that insomnia for about 15 years before I was able to figure something out for it.
Right, right. Okay, so we're still at the beginning here where you just were realizing something was going on and you're having this happen several days a week. What were your days like? Were you sleepy during the day because you were having such disrupted sleep at night?
I was not sleepy, and it was actually the beginning of developing bipolar disorder, because bipolar disorder, as I understand it, which is a different perspective than the medical field might say, is a disorder of the nervous system. And it's when there's these two extremes, the extreme highs and the extreme lows. And that's just the two ends of the nervous system being so dysregulated, they go hand in hand. Instead of being at that regulated baseline, there's this polar opposite dysregulation happening in cycles. And so I had a lot of energy during the day, and that was my nervous system really running on those like stress hormones and the stress neurochemicals. And it eventually led to bipolar, where that the reason for the high energy dysregulation was not being able to sleep at night, and then my body having, the adrenaline and the cortisol keeping me going until there was a crash.
Right, and that's exactly what my next question was gonna be. So because you mentioned crash before, what does a crash look like? Were you in bed for several days at a time, or what does that actually look like?
So I didn't get a crash when it originally started. It took about 3 years until it crashed. And I think part of that is because when you're very young, your body and your brain are so adaptable, and you're so flexible. You just go with whatever's coming up. And so it wasn't until age 14, just entering high school, that I started to experience the crash. And then that looked like very severe depression and fatigue and not being able to eat or overeating, just the dysregulated eating habits, would sleep for like 12 hours at a time and then like nap midday and just had no energy for anything. And then eventually, um, contributing from, external stimulus, being around different people or eating different foods or like different things can kind of assist the shift. But eventually would go back into the high of energy all the time and not sleeping.
Mhm. So so in the beginning when this started, you said that your parents really weren't in tune to it and they were just, go back to bed and let us sleep. At some point, did they finally realize that, something doesn't seem right?
Nope, not at all.
Really?
I thought
Wow.
it was just rebellious teenager things. They didn't have the framework to understand mental health. They hadn't, grown up with the awareness of that. That wasn't something in their paradigm. And so when there was the clues that came up through, my own engagement and interactions, behavioral patterns, like different things that came up, it was judged harshly, but not understood from the lens of health per se.
So then at what point, what age was it when you finally realized, okay, there's some thing that I need to talk to somebody about? And did you do that yourself or did your parents finally come around? How did that happen?
Yeah, I was in therapy briefly in high school. And they were supportive for a very short period of time, a few weeks, and then it was like, "Oh, it's not working, we're done." And I'm like, "Well, it doesn't really work overnight, but okay." And then once I was in college, that's when I started to take, adulthood, I moved out, starting to figure it out, and went and saw therapist, psychiatrist, and was doing the research. I took a lot of psych classes in college. I just wanted to understand myself. I knew there was something more to the reality, but even that proved very futile. They kind of slapped a label and was like, here's a thing, here's a medication, and that's kind of the end of it. It didn't work. I stopped taking it. I was like, okay, whatever. And then revisited it a couple years later when I was 21. And that's when I'd kind of found out more about mental health and different diagnoses and different treatment and healing methods. And then that's when I really committed to the process and was seeing therapists very regularly and trying the different psych meds. And 3 years in that left me worse off than ever before. They had put me on
Boy.
so many different medications. They had done all these therapies to bring up traumas, and it just re traumatized my body without processing anything. And I was way worse off than before, even going through the treatment process.
Wow. So, all right, you said that, at some point you realized that there was unprocessed trauma from like 4 years old. So, at what point in this whole process and seeing all these people, did it even come up that possibly trauma was something that, was related to the problems?
Yeah. So there had been a severe trauma when I was 18. And so that came up in therapy fairly early on. And so there was like a diagnosis of PTSD. There was this understanding that trauma was causing it. But it wasn't until age 24, over 10 years after the symptoms had started, that someone suggested, a therapist suggested that there might be this other clue, this other missing piece of the puzzle, that there could be suppressed childhood trauma. And I'm like, no, that's impossible. Like I had a great childhood. These problems started later, blah, blah, blah. And then that's kind of when things shifted and changed. And I started to do a deeper inner work. And it was through 2,000 hours of self hypnosis over a 2 year period that I was able to uncover the details and actually know for certain that there was this thing that happened. It matched all the weird body sensations. And then from that uncovery was able to go through my own healing of processing it on my own.
I mean, I'm listening to everything you're saying, and I'm hearing clearly in the background that you did a lot of work on your own to really first understand how to process psychological things and then actually do it. So when you said, the self work, that's amazing. Um, but before we even get to that, you said you saw different therapists and then you were on all these medications. And I'm curious, how did you even know what type of therapist to look for or find one? And then who was it that was giving you the medications? Was it a psychiatrist? Was it a primary care? How did that come about?
Yeah, great question. So, I just went with whatever therapist was recommended through my insurance. They'd kind of give me a short list, and just based on, maybe their qualifications or history or proximity for driving purposes, I would try one. And, we'd journey for a while, but ultimately every therapist got to a point where they're like, there's nothing else I can do to help you. Like their basic tools weren't working. And I'm like, well, this was a waste of my time. Who else can help me? So there was a lot of switching around, not because of any fault of my own or even a fault of theirs. They just weren't prepared to actually support someone with real issues. Like it was very surface level, like mindfulness. And well, have you tried going for a walk and drinking a glass of warm milk before bed? Like very basic stuff. And I'm just like, okay, that's not helpful. That combined with like, well, let's dig into all of the traumas you've ever, like even micro traumas. Like maybe this one thing is why it happened. And it was just like, you're just digging around for wounds that isn't actually going to help me heal. Like it's not solving the problem. You're just perpetuating it without healing it.
Right.
And so there was a lot of switching around between therapists. which was very frustrating because starting over with someone new was always so hard. And then almost every time they're suggesting like a totally different diagnosis. And I'm like, okay, this is just getting out of hand. It seems like none of you guys actually had the same training. It's like, it's so the the current model is very outdated for where we are in our evolution of understanding the mind, the body, the neuroscience of experience. Like the current structure is not there in a supportive way like it's meant to. It was maybe great, a few decades ago when it started, but we've evolved past that, and so it's just very outdated. And then the meds were prescribed from a psychiatrist, so I was seeing two doctors at every time.
I see. Okay. All right. So then there's a whole lot for us to talk about in terms of actual approaches and everything based on what you just shared. But before we do that, we've got to take a commercial break. So we'll be back in just a minute on Sleep Science Today, and we're going to talk about well, not sort of, we are going to talk about approaches and different methods to addressing mental health issues. So we'll be right back. Be sure to visit sleepsciencetoday.com for access to all of our channels and special offers.
Sleep Science Today, and sleep better tonight.
All right, we are back on Sleep Science Today. Before the break, we were talking about traditional approaches or maybe not traditional approaches because some of the approaches were not approaches at all. It was kind of a fishing expedition, it sounded like. So ultimately, maybe it would help to frame it if we understand ultimately what are all the different things that you eventually realized were going on? Because you had alluded to the fact that there's several things that were happening.
Yeah, so the core issue was the unprocessed trauma memories, but not the conscious memories, right? If you go around and you're in therapy and you're like, okay, let's bring up the memory, what you're talking about, the images that you can see, the story that you can tell, those are all conscious memories. But that's not what disrupts sleep. That's not what causes dysregulation in the nervous system or health issues. What's really causing that is unconscious memories which live in the body, and you can't access that from the mind. You can do every trick in the book, but your mind cannot reach into the body and look around the library of unconscious memories. And so there's two types of unconscious memories. There's emotional memories and procedural memories, which are like body responses kind of a thing. And so the trauma memories in the body is what was disrupting it. And the body memories are really the sounding board to tell the nervous system how to regulate itself. And so some people might say, oh, well, the core issue was the dysregulation of the nervous system. So if you just regulate the nervous system, you'll be healed. But there's a deeper reality where what's telling the nervous system how to self-regulate is those body memories. So even if you regulate the nervous system, it will eventually get dysregulated because what's causing it hasn't been addressed. So it's really
Mhm.
rewiring the body memories, and that can't be done by going back into the past and bringing up the traumas and talking about it or having anything done through the experience of the mind. It's about teaching the body new patterns of how to feel and how to move, which is a much deeper, more complex process.
Right, right. So, you know, when you explain that, um, initially, you go way back to this childhood trauma that you're referencing. Is that something that was like a one-time thing, or was it a continuous thing? And I'll tell you why I ask. I have worked with patients who are in their home and they're having trouble sleeping. And we realize the reason they're having trouble sleeping is trauma related. But oftentimes the trauma is continuous, or the threat of the trauma is continuous. So their body remains awake at night to protect themselves from that potential trauma. Now, that's different from someone that had a trauma that occurred and then stopped, and then, it's still in the body. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, absolutely. As far as I know, it was isolated to a single summer. Whether it was one time or multiple times is not definitive because there's one particular scene that was recovered and it could have been the same scene happening again and again. But I do believe, as far as I know, is isolated to a summer. So within a few months, it was something that happened and then was no longer happening. But it gets more complex because even though it stopped happening, once my body hit the prepubescent stage, my hormones were shifting and that reactivated the body memories. And so my body was reliving the trauma every night. And so even though it wasn't happening, the effects of my on my brain and my body, whereas if it was reoccurring every night because of the intensity of which it was being unconsciously relived when it was resurfacing age 10, 11.
Okay. So, obviously you're able to speak about it more intelligently now because you understand what was going on. And I know you said you did a lot of work on your own. What is it ultimately that helped you figure it out and understand what was actually going on?
So it was a very long, gradual process. It was never a magic moment. But the first key was really unlocking the neuroscience of it all and not just looking at the psychology. Psychology, as accurate and as interesting as it can be, it limits it to the mind without a deeper understanding of the body most of the time. And so to believe that it's all in the mind means you have to work with the mind. But if you're unaware that it's coming more from the body, then the approaches won't effectively address the body part of it, which is all of it. And so, really understanding the neuroscience of the brain hemispheres, the triune brain, the unconscious memories, the nervous system, how attachment development and early life relationships helps shape that regulation and the regulation kind of protocols was really the first key of understanding it. And then noticing the different patterns of my own dysregulation because there's actually 5 different types of dysregulation or trauma responses, and they all kind of have different needs in a way. And so kind of getting to know each of those different parts of my inner world and the trauma responses and stuff helped me kind of create coping techniques and then ultimately healing methods for kind of each of those different parts.
Hmm. And these are things that you developed on your own through your own work?
What I used in the end was in the beginning, I was using stuff like parts work, practices that come from internal family systems, different meditations, guided meditation practices were really supportive, different affirmation practices and kind of repeating those out loud and letting those words ground in my body. Emotional freedom technique or tapping was used. And a couple other practices like yoga and things like that to just kind of reconnect the mind and the body, have more presence in the body was a really big one because for a very long time there was a lot of dissociation, which was a result of the trauma. And then, of course, that does tie into the insomnia I was experiencing.
Hmm. So through this whole time, because you've talked about from childhood all the way through college and adulthood, at what point or through that whole time, let's start with that. Through that whole time, were you continuing to have insomnia?
Yes, it was an on and off battle. There were some times that were better than others. If I was in a very great living situation with a great solid friend circle and doing work I enjoyed and stuff, it was a little less intense. And there was also a lot of self medicating, unfortunately, in the process of that. So using different sedatives or drinking alcohol, different things that were used to kind of cope with it, but it was always a reoccurring issue, even if there were a few months where it got a little better for a little while.
So was there a point eventually where you actually started to sleep through the night, get actual restful sleep, and realized that you were finally sleeping?
Um, There might have been a few, like, periods throughout, but that really didn't happen until, like, the last 5 years when I was kind of on the other side of my healing journey, and in addition to the things that I shared with you that I use to help that are kind of existing things, anybody can go Google them and find those things and start practicing them right away. Do encourage that. Go do that as soon as you're listening to the show.
Huh?
But in addition, the thing that I developed that changed the game for me was guided mirror practices. So eye gazing in a mirror and then doing specific practices was the thing that actually ultimately allowed me to heal and rewire the body memories from trauma without needing to revisit the past, to teach my nervous system a new way of self regulating, and ultimately to get that deep sleep where I'm now able to go to bed. I feel relaxed in my body. My mind is quiet. Everything's at peace. I fall asleep quickly and easily, sleep a full 8 hours through the night, and wake up feeling rested. And I'm able to, just in the last 5 years, experience that consistently and naturally without anything, substance wise to make it happen for the first time since I was a child.
Wow. Wow. That's a long time in coming. Um, so so you also had mentioned that you had taken a lot of different medications that were prescribed throughout this journey. Um, just trying to kind of clarify what the actual treatment process looked like for you. You talked about you had different therapists and they did different things that weren't really working. Can you give us a sense of what type of medications were you put on and did you take them and what did they do? And are you still on them? Did you get off? Give us that whole picture.
Yeah, so from 2014 to 2017 was the time I was on a lot of meds, was taking them very consistently. I don't remember all the names of them now. There was over 4D different types of medications they tried in a variety of combos and stuff because there were other symptoms as well. So they were trying to treat the insomnia along with some other things that were an issue. There was a lot of side effects. I landed in the emergency room multiple times because the side effects were so severe. And when I went back to my psychiatrist and explained, like, hey, I'm taking these as prescribed, like, I know there's, some level of normalcy of side effects because you're letting the body get used to this new thing, but this is unbearable and it's not fully helping relieve the symptoms. Like, we need to try something else. And the psychiatrist generally would say, no, you have to take them for 6 to 8 weeks or we can't know if it's working. And I'm like, okay, but it's a week in and I can't go to work. I can't keep food down. I can't sleep. I'm in
Oh,
the emergency room. Like, you have to help me. And they were like, you have to stay on them or you're a non compliant patient. And so there was a certain level of psychiatric abuse that was happening because I had no choice. They were my only hope for healing. They were my only source of support and someone saying, hey, we have something that can help. And so I lost a lot of weight. Like I said, I wasn't able to keep food down. Like, there was a whole series of other health issues that kind of arose from the side effects, and the meds never fully helped. Even when I was able to sleep, I woke up feeling very drugged, like the drugs were very obviously in my system. There was no mental clarity. I couldn't accomplish tasks. Like, I was just like sedated basically. And so meds were very ineffective. And even when they were slightly effective, the cost was too high of what else it took from me, functional wise capacity to function.
right, right. Wow. So of all these different meds that you mentioned, were some of them given to you specifically for sleep, or it was just for so many different things that it was too hard to know what was what?
Yeah, there is usually one specifically for sleep and then another one for some of the other just symptoms and stuff. I don't remember the specific names just because it has been so long. In 2017, once I discovered neuroscience and I started teaching myself this, I was like, wow, there's no way these meds can actually be good for me. They're putting all these man made chemicals in my body and completely ignoring the root cause. So I actually quit all my medications cold turkey, went through 4 weeks of the most hellish withdrawal, and never touched psych meds again. So since 2017, I've been free from them. And since 2021, 2021 ish, I've been able to sleep consistently because of my own healing work I did.
Right. Right. Wow. Wow. Okay. So you said a magic phrase there, which is root cause, which is such an important thing, and so often not even part of the equation, unfortunately, today in a lot of cases. And so I want to talk a little bit more about that. But before we do, we've got to take our second break. So we will take a break on sleep science today. We'll be back and we'll talk about root causes. Be sure to visit sleepsciencetoday.com for access to all of our channels and special offers.
Sleep science today. And sleep better tonight.
All right, welcome back to Sleep Science Today. I'm your host, Andrew Kolsky. We are talking about trauma and sleep, and we were just going to start talking about root causes when we took our break. The reason I say that root cause is such a magic phrase, and maybe this gets into the discussion that people have between like Eastern medicine and Western medicine and different approaches to medication. Um, Sleep itself, now trauma obviously is its own huge field, but sleep itself is such a relatively new field when it comes to the medical community. And so many times what I hear from stories from my own patients is the same story that you're telling. I've had this issue. I went to a therapist and I really didn't feel like I was getting anywhere. And then I went to my doctor and they gave me some pills and then I might have had side effects. And, you know, it was all kind of window dressing stuff. And the story that I don't hear is that, nobody talked to me about my root cause. Like, why is this happening in the first place? They were addressing the symptoms, not the problem. So in your particular experience, it sounds like it was you personally who had to identify the root cause. Or am I wrong? Was there anybody that tried to work on that with you?
No, you're correct. Sadly, and I saw over 100 doctors, therapists, psychiatrists, regular traditional primary care doctors, and not a single one of them even attempted to address. The closest attempt was, oh, trauma is contributing to it, so let's go rehash all of your traumas. And that re-traumatized my body instead of processing them. And so there wasn't this capacity to say, oh, here's exactly what's happening, and here's how to heal it. And so through my own inner work and research and just piecing together the dots, one contributor, obviously, the nervous system and the regulation of the nervous system, and then second to that was the hormones and neurochemicals. Like we've got those certain things that are cued in our brain. It's like, oh, release that. Now she feels tired and can have the deep sleep, right? And so if those aren't getting released effectively in the right point of time and the right amount, then you don't get that feeling of sleep and allowed to do that. The third thing that I found was brainwave regulation. So if your brainwaves are super high, your mind's in that busy mode, right? You're thinking about all the stuff you got to do and you're rehearsing what's happening tomorrow and you're replaying what happened in the past and your mind is very active and noisy and you're like, shut up, I'm trying to sleep here, like quiet up there, like what are you doing? And that was the brainwave regulation. So there's all these like different regulation things happening in the brain and the body, and those were never talked about by any of the doctors that I saw.
Right. Okay. So that one, the brain waves that you're talking about is a really big one. And I would love to hear what you personally found that worked for you, because there's so many people who have that issue. They go into bed and the brain is just on and it's wired. And there's no way that they're going to relax and get sleep because everything is spinning in there. So what did you do that you found to be effective?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, it's such a common issue and it's so frustrating to experience too, because it's like, where's the turn off switch? How do I
Right.
the off button? Where's the volume down? So one thing we need to understand about the nervous system, because it does impact the brain waves, is there's the upregulation, which is having high energy and your capacity to, talk and function and like do all this stuff. And then there's the down regulation, which is where you're calm and relaxed and your body's limp and you don't want to do anything and you're tired, you're ready for sleep. And so when you get to the end of the day, you want to be going into that down regulation. But then during the day, you want to make sure that you get to up regulation. So for people who have a very sedentary lifestyle and they're not moving a lot during the day, or they don't put in that time for exercise, physical activity, then there's all this like stored up energy in the body. And then you get to night and you're like, okay, let's down regulate. And it's like, you've been down regulated all day. your body's like, we need to get the upregulation at some point. It may as well be now. And so it's important to get that movement, to be physically active, to get time in the sunshine, to move your body, because if you don't kind of expel the energy during the day in a very healthy way, it accumulates and gets unlocked at night. And then once you're able to kind of have that that lifestyle shift, then it's the down regulation at night, which can be done through yoga practices of like the deep stretching, not the higher active ones, but the lower gentle, the very gentle yoga where you're holding a stretch for like 30 seconds to like a minute or even 2 minutes, and then just really slowing your breathing. There's different forms of breath work that can help with the up regulation or the down regulation. So people, like some of my clients, I lead them through the up regulation breath work to practice every morning and the down regulation to practice every evening. And you're just reteaching your body how to do that self-regulating with a little encouragement. So the yoga, the breath work, and then guided meditations are just another just invaluable tool, and they're so accessible now. Like you can just hop on Spotify or YouTube and play one. Hopefully there's not too many ads interrupting. But guided meditations are great because that's going to tell the brain waves to get in a lower state. It's going to bring the brain waves from up here to kind of a more settled, calm state. And so those were 3 things that I integrated, and I teach people to how to integrate as well. And then the one that really changed the game in addition to that was the guided mirror practices. And I actually have a free 20-minute guided practice. We can share the link with the podcast so all the listeners can grab that freebie. That's great to use before bed. It's just 20 minutes. You're just standing or sitting in front of a mirror. You just follow the audio guide. You reconnect mind and body. It's very grounding for the nervous system. And one key piece, which is kind of a whole other topic, but it does play in, so I'll mention it, is really tending to our own emotional needs. Because one of those 2 types of unconscious memories we talked about, which carry the trauma and then affect the regulation, is those emotional memories. And so if we have emotional memories of, it could even be micro traumas, moments where we didn't feel seen or loved or safe, supported, like we weren't valued or we didn't matter, or um, just these different needs that we all innately have. Moments of not having those needs met get stuck in the body. And when we're going through our day, we're very focused in the outer world. But then as you're going to sleep, your whole brain and body are turned inward. And so that's when those unprocessed emotions are most likely to come to the surface, because you're finally giving your brain and body the space to notice your inner world. And so that's why you can go through your whole day and it's irrelevant. But then as soon as you're trying to fall asleep, it's happening. And so a lot of times when we have those thoughts, it's not actually coming from the mind, it's coming from the body. And it's not actually about the thoughts, it's about unprocessed feelings. But it never comes up in the symptoms. The symptoms are never, man, but I didn't feel loved in that interaction 3 years ago. Like it doesn't come up, but instead your mind is trying to solve the problem of, how do I make sure that I keep getting that need met or survive the need not being met? And so your mind is kind of problem solving. How do I be safe? Well, if I control the events of the day, then I have safety, for example. Or if I prove myself, then I can feel seen and loved. And so then your mind is doing its overtime work of, how do I accomplish this task? Or how can I have, control of my day? And it's coming out in that way. But oftentimes there's this underlying unmet emotional need stored in the body beyond awareness, and that's actually the driving force. And so mirror practices can help us meet our own emotional needs and process unmet emotional needs or emotional traumas, and that gives the body just this huge, like, I can finally let go. I can finally breathe deep. I'm finally safe to relax. And when the body is good, the mind doesn't have to work on overdrive. And so there's the piece of kind of the brainwave regulation and, the helping the mind be calm. But then there's also this deeper piece of working with the body and really making sure that it has the tools to self-regulate.
Right, right. Wow, wow. So there's a lot in there that you've learned over the years. So, you mentioned clients and people that you work with. Tell us a little bit more about that. Like, what types of people? Is it strictly people with trauma? Is it people with sleep issues? And how do they find you? Like, what are they looking for when they work with
Yeah, absolutely. So I work with people all over the world from all ages and backgrounds. Some have gone through trauma, some have not, some have sleep issues, some do not, a whole myriad of issues. But they usually come to me when they've been in therapy a while and haven't noticed the changes they want to see, is usually the point where they come find me. And it's for anything in their mental, emotional, or even physical health. And they're ready to get to the root cause. They're tired of the traditional approaches that only address surface symptoms. They want to understand their inner world on a deeper level, reclaim their power, validate their experiences, and get to know all parts of themselves. So it's not just the surface symptoms or it's all just me. It's I understand all these different parts that are contributing to my wholeness, my identity, and then also my experience. And then to have daily practices where they can start to heal themselves instead of waiting for someone externally to facilitate it for them. They want to be able to learn the practices. And so I teach people practices for embodied healing that they can use on their own. And then I guide them through the process of really becoming their own healer and hero so they have all the power. The power is not just in the person they hire for support, but they get to unlock their own self-healing superpowers. And people can find me on Instagram and on my website. And then I have that 20-minute free guided mirror practice just to kind of get people started, give them a little taste test. And then I have different ways to work with people through my one-on-one mentorship.
Wow. Wow. Okay. All right. So then let's do this. You said you're going to share that link with me that I'll put in the podcast description, but just tell us, like, what is your website? How would people find you? Give us some of the contact information.
Yeah, it's kristenkarina.wixsite.com/heal yourself is the website. You can find me on Instagram at Kristen's Quantum Catalyzers. And you can always reach out through email with any questions at kristenwindsorco@gmail.com. Yeah, so many great magics, and I'm very grateful for the chance to share.
All right, so you'll share all those with me, and we'll just go ahead and put them in the description so that people can find that. So time flew. we are at our time here, which I'm kind of surprised because there's so many more questions that I'd love to ask you, but we've run out of time, and we can't go beyond that because we have other shows coming up. So I will give you a chance for sort of last thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I wish I could tell my past self is that she has all the power. So if there's anyone here struggling, it's easy to feel like the insomnia has all the power or doctors have all the power and you're very helpless in the situation. It feels very helpless because it's affecting every area of life. Sleep is so important. But you have all the power, and learning to build this healthy relationship with all parts of yourself and really tend to your own deep needs in daily life really holds the key. And so creating morning rituals, evening bedtime rituals, and just trying new practices that can support your brain and your body to just reconnect with love, reconnect with presence. It can really make all the difference. And progress is gradual, so be patient in the process.
Fantastic. Well, Kristen Windsor, thank you so much for taking the time to join us, and thank you for sharing your own personal story. It's amazing what you were able to do and learn on your own. And, like you said, your career came from it. So maybe that's a positive thing, not only for yourself, but for the people that you're able to help. So thank you for joining us on Sleep Science Today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
And for those of you listening, if you want to hear other episodes, visit us at sleepsciencetoday.com. We've got all of our episodes up on YouTube, so you can actually watch the show, or you can listen on various podcast networks and, of course, on UK Health Radio. We'll see you on a future show.
You have been listening to Sleep Science Today, your #1 sleep authority.
Sleep Science Today.